My name is Maria Villella and I live in Santa Monica, California. When I was younger, I was a ballet dancer and I did karate, but it was really only because my father wanted me to do karate, but I really loved ballet. So I was pretty active and I was used to having more arts than athletic. I tried soccer and I was terrible, but I loved ballet. And at a certain point, I went to college and I was studying fine arts. I have my bachelor's degree is a BFA with a focus in photography. So while I was in school, it was a lot of art and taking pictures and spending time in the darkroom, and then also a lot of studying because you still have to get through all your other courses. So writing papers, studying for exams, and I wasn't really doing anything physical. So I decided that I was going to start something. I was going to look into like some sort of dance class. And I picked up the local Art Voice. It's the local newspaper, but like the community paper. And I saw an ad in there, and there were two women doing these postures, and the postures were beautiful to me. So I was like, oh, wow. And then I read the article, and it was about a new yoga studio that had just opened up maybe 5 minutes away from where I was living. So I thought to myself, well, I don't know if I can really do yoga. I pictured everyone sitting around meditating, and I felt like I was too active, like rajasic for that. So I was like, I don't know, let me go and check it out. So I went to the studio and I met who became my first yoga teacher, and I told her about my background with dance and karate, and she said, well, you sound like an Ashtanga girl, then you should try the Ashtanga. And so I signed up for a 4-week course in Ashtanga, and after my first class, I was completely hooked. It was like I had dropped into something that was completely home for me. And I remember after that class talking to another girl who was in the class and just saying, oh my God, that's so amazing. Can't believe how amazing the practice is. And she was like, really? She's like, I didn't really like it that much. And I was like, to me, in my mind, I was like, what is wrong with you? I couldn't believe that anybody didn't have the same experience as I was having. Because for me, it was so amazing. So I just knew that to some degree the practice would be a part of my life forever. And it has ever since. So my practice has evolved a lot over the years. When I first started, I was in a small community in Buffalo, and there wasn't a lot of Ashtanga. So I didn't practice 5 or 6 days a week. I practiced when I could. I was in school, so it was more like 3 days a week, and I would do a little bit, and that means going into the studio. And then the Ashtanga teacher in Buffalo left, and so I had to start driving up to Toronto in order to deepen my practice. I found a teacher up in Toronto. And then there was more and more curiosity, and then I wound up moving up to Toronto because I needed to learn more and teaching up in Toronto. And then I went to India. So I think in the beginning, when I was first learning the practice, I was obsessed. I would do like 8 hours of yoga some days on the weekends. I would be reading about yoga constantly, doing breathing, meditation, practicing. Then when I went back to school for oriental medicine, I didn't have that kind of time or energy, so it became more like a normal practice, 5-6 days a week, and not practicing on moon days or Saturdays. And I think I was more exploratory before. I didn't only do Ashtanga. I would dabble with vinyasa. I would take Iyengar classes. And now my practice is different. It's more in maintenance mode and sometimes even regression mode. It's not my number one priority anymore. Having a daily practice is a priority because it centers me, it balances me out. But I don't have the ambition that I used to have. It's more just about keeping myself going, balancing out my life work and my other obligations and duties. And if I miss a day of practice, I don't feel guilty at all about it. I'm much more forgiving with myself, not as hard on myself as I used to be. And I look at it more like I'm living yoga. Like as long as I'm acting consciously in my life and I'm coming from a place where I'm living as authentically as I can and as connected to my source at all points, then I'm pleased with that. When I was in Mysore, Guruji wasn't teaching anymore, but I did get to meet him, and for me, that was really important. I wanted to make sure that I was able to go to India to meet him. I knew that he was getting older, and I figured we wouldn't have him forever, so I made a point to go there, and I'm glad I got to do that, but I mostly practiced with Sharat. My most memorable event in India was actually outside of Mysore. I had an amazing time in Mysore, of course, and it was great connecting with the roots of the practice. But I met this little boy, his name was Santosh, which means contentment, when I was in, where was I? Oh, Pondicherry. So it was actually in Oroville, which is a small town outside of Pondicherry. And I had just gotten there and I was looking for the town center because you have to go there to get an account so that you can get food and lodging. And I was on a little moped and I couldn't find the town center. And I stopped the moped and was looking at a map, and this little boy comes up to me and he says, "Are you lost?" And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "I don't really know where the town center is." And he was like, "Well, it's over that way." And he was like, "I can show you where it is." And I was like, "Well, where's your mom? Where's your dad?" I was like, "You can't come with me, I'm a stranger." So I'm looking at it from this Western perspective of like, why is this little kid so like okay with being with a stranger? And he was like, "My mom's in Hyderabad, my dad's working, or my dad's in Hyderabad working, and my mom's with my grandmother helping her out of town." And he was like, "It's okay." And I was like, "Well, who's watching you?" And he's like, "I'm staying with the town people." I was like, "Okay." And so he's like, "Let me come with you. I'll show you where you're going." I'm very hesitant, very insecure about the whole thing. I'm picturing myself, oh my gosh, I'm kidnapping this kid. I'm going to get in trouble. But for some reason, I let him on. And so we ride to the town center. And then my mind starts thinking like, maybe this kid's like trying to rob me, or like, why does he want to come with me? Am I going to get in trouble? I'm still in fear, like completely in fear. We get to the town center and we separate. He goes to there's like a little store, and I go to sign up for an account. And then I'm leaving and I can't find him anymore. And I'm like, maybe he just left. Maybe he went back. Part of me is relieved because I'm like, okay. He just wanted a ride here, and my responsibilities are done. But then another part of me was like, but he's probably 15 minutes moped ride away from where he lives. I have to get him back. So I'm just waiting and starting to walk back to the bike, looking around, and then I hear him, "Hey, where are you going? I'm right here." And he starts like following behind me, and I'm like, "Oh, thank God, where have you been? I thought I lost you." And he says, "Oh, I bought you this postcard." And so he had gone into the store and he bought me a postcard. He was like, "Here, it's a gift." And he handed it to me, and it just was so heartwarming because here I was faced with my plague and my plagued mind and my conditioning based on where I grew up with. I had all this fear. And to see a young child who was just living so open-heartedly and without fear, and he had gotten money from somebody, but he didn't keep the money for himself. He actually bought a postcard to give to me. And it was just really beautiful. And then after that, he and I became friends. And whenever I would go to the beach, I would pick him up and we go to the beach. I'd drop him off at home, and I'd take him for pasta. He loved to eat pasta. And it was just, it was really awakening on a lot of levels. From my 6 years of teaching Ashtanga and the Mysore tradition, I observed many different personalities and my own. Teaching others really teaches you a lot about yourself, because you see where your triggers are, and sometimes you see how you trigger other people too. And more than anything, it taught me compassion, and it really just reflected back to me so much of my own personality. Like, why am I holding so rigidly to this principle? And how we're all in it together, and if somebody does something and I get inflamed, and I lose my cool, or I tell them to leave, then I'm not really helping them out. And sometimes the best thing for a teacher to do, what I learned, is actually to do nothing and just hold space for people to find things on their own. And the reality is that I don't have the answers for them. I can do my best to try and direct them in a certain way based on my experience, but it's still my experience, and I can't project or have an agenda with where they take it all. They're going to take it in the direction that is right for them. For me, the qualities of a sincere student or practitioner or teacher, the same qualities we would expect of anyone, love and compassion. I think in the end of the day, that's the most important, is that we're coming to it with love, compassion, patience for our teachers, patience for ourselves, patience for the other people in the room, and love. In order to maintain a practice like Ashtanga, it's not the easiest path. I don't think any of them are easy. They're all challenging in different ways. But we need support from a community, and we need unconditional love. I don't know one person who hasn't walked through life without an ounce of shadow. And if we are all understanding that we all have that darkness, and we help each other out of it as best we can, and if we can't help each other out of it, at least we don't judge it or reinforce it. I think then we're doing the best yoga we can. My journey with becoming a practitioner of oriental medicine actually started when I was in Canada, and I was really inspired by the other teachers in the studio where I was practicing and teaching, because a lot of them had other things. They weren't full-time yoga teachers. That was something they did on the side, and they were full-time healers, either osteopaths, chiropractors, or practitioners of oriental medicine. So although we were learning Ashtanga, it was also heavily immersed in therapeutics. So we were looking at the practice as a healing method. So I saw, as I was teaching, that at a certain point I felt like I needed to have more to help people. And I always had a curiosity in medicine, and I wasn't sure which type at that point when I was in Toronto. I was curious about chiropractic, osteopathy, and Chinese medicine. But when I moved to California, I was dealing with a back issue. I called it an injury at the time, but now I know it wasn't really a serious injury, but wasn't comfortable, and acupuncture helped me out a lot. And what I liked about the program, the acupuncture program, is that we studied a good amount of Western medicine and a good amount of Eastern medicine philosophy. And I saw it as something that could help in a lot of ways. So internally with the herbs and with nutrition, philosophically dealing with the emotions, which are connected to organ systems, and then physically acupuncture, Tui Na, shiatsu, all those things really helpful. And not that they only deal with the physical, they very much so deal with everything. But I liked that it was comprehensive. I liked that it was, it dealt with the whole being as opposed to just a section of the being. And so I chose that path, and I'm very glad I did. After about a year of the program, it was really difficult, and I questioned stopping and just going back to teaching yoga. I struggled with, have I left a path and now I'm starting a new one? And it was a bit of a dilemma for me because I didn't want to be the person who was always drilling another hole, never getting to the depth. So I struggled with that, but that wasn't the case for me. I don't think so anyhow. I still maintained my Ashtanga practice, and learning oriental medicine and studying the human condition from that lens actually highlighted and it helped me see other things in myself and in other people that I wasn't seeing before. Self-care for me is the things that nourish me are spending time with my husband and my dog, Ellie, and also time by myself. I'm actually naturally more of an introvert. I've chosen a profession that requires me to be a little more extroverted, to communicate with people or in classes, teaching, but I could very easily stay at home and meditate and relax, take hot baths, go on hikes. I love my friends. I have dear friends, but sometimes I actually need to withdraw and just and take hikes by myself or go to the spa by myself. I like to go to the Korean spa, and it's one of my favorite things to do. And I'll go with friends sometimes because they'll ask me, but I actually kind of like going by myself the best because I'll just be quiet. And so for me, quiet is one of the most nourishing things. I take herbs regularly. I cook. I eat very healthy. I like to sleep. I don't get as much of it. I don't really require as much as I used to either, though. But yeah, long baths, quiet time. So teachers, guides, mentors on my path, I've had many. I always was really open to different teachings. And when I first started yoga, if I went to I didn't even look at who was teaching on the schedule. I just went. And I always had the approach that whatever that teacher said, I needed to hear. And there was some message in whatever they were doing that was important. And I tried not to have an expectation of what the practice should be. And my first teacher, Julie Walsh, I'm not even sure if she's teaching anymore. She moved to Rochester. She was really inspiring. And I think she was a student of Tim Miller's. So I've never actually practiced with Tim Miller, but in some way it's come through her. And beautiful, fluid, graceful practice, and really inspiring in her words, and always saying things like, just try it today, keep trying, every day you get a little closer. And I always believed her, and she was right, maybe because I believed her. Then Ron Reed was, and still is, probably one of the most influential yoga teachers I've had to this day. Very modest man, very brilliant, and a healer too, very much so a healer. He really taught me a lot about conserving my energy in my practice and therefore in my life. He taught me a lot about containment. I was very flexible, very open in the practice, but I was hurting myself. I didn't have any idea. Like, I just thought you just take your flexibility and exploit it. He taught me about how to find my center and how to balance things out. Invaluable. Thank you, Ron. Then Mati and Chuck were incredibly influential, and very similar in how they approached the practice to how Ron did. And I learned a lot from them, and a lot about how to teach and how to really break things down for beginners, and how the work doesn't really change whether you're doing handstands or you're doing samastitihi. It's all the same internal work. And then now Maya Hayes, I have to talk about her. Brilliant, beautiful teacher. She's been really inspiring for me as well. And just her rootedness in the tradition and dedication to the tradition and to the path. Very inspiring. And then now my most influential teacher is George Falcon, who doesn't teach me yoga asana at all, but he's brought out the darker parts of my consciousness and helped me work through some of those. So more of a meditation teacher, and in some ways more like a therapist, but really has taught me a lot about love and commitment and letting go of dysfunction and seeing it in myself and letting it go. Your practice is working when it's taking you from darkness to light. That's how you know your practice is working. And sometimes it requires that you stop doing what you're doing and practice and all is coming. Really famous quote by Patabi Joyce. But if it's what are you practicing? For instance, if you're sitting to meditate and you're sitting rigidly for 15 minutes, it doesn't matter if the posture is right. If you're practicing thinking, emoting, it's not going to take you out of thinking and emoting. And the same with the Ashtanga practice. If you're practicing your personality on the mat and you're practicing everything you do, and it's not actually causing you to change and transform those aspects of yourself, then it's really not working. And there have been plenty of times where I had to seek out a therapist because the Ashtanga practice, for whatever reasons, maybe it was me, I wasn't ready for it. It wasn't changing my life. My life wasn't getting better. It was getting more and more chaotic. And maybe it was because I was, using the practice as a way to amplify my own type A personality or my own imbalances. So sometimes we have to go outside of the practice that we're practicing, and we have to ask for help from teachers. A teacher isn't necessarily only your Ashtanga teacher, or it might be your parent, it might be your partner at the time, it might be your children, it might be a therapist, it might be a Chinese medicine practitioner. But yeah, a practice should be changing your life.